All right, welcome in. It is Gridiron 360. This is Bill. I got Dave with me.
Good morning, all.
Thank you for listening. We are bringing you a Week 6 recap of college football this weekend today. Crazy things happening, not so crazy things. Maybe games started with an eyebrow raise based on the performances of some of the teams, especially the top teams. But at the end of the game, everything shook out, I guess, as supposed to. One of the things that I'm kind of battling with is that we usually see a lot of mix-up, especially kind of on the big end, on the top end of, I guess, what you'd say the AP poll. More of the shakeups have been in the teens and 20s of people in and out of the poll, but those folks at the top have been remaining pretty solid. And, again, usually you see someone, that's not what we thought and bounces out, and it's just not showing up that way. So interesting happenings. Dave, what'd you think about this weekend? Why don't you run through some conference stuff with us, brother?
Yeah, well, there is always, as college football, when you least expect it, there will be some craziness. But like you said, the top stayed pretty solid. Obviously, we had I guess now number 2 team, but the Clemson Tigers were idle. In the ACC, we had 4 games. Really, unfortunately, I wish they were of more importance, but the ACC has really not done well this year. No consistency beyond Clemson. So first game we had Pitt taking on Duke. Duke, after a big showing last week, came out at home, and Pitt beat them. It was a close game, 33-30. The Duke defense, this Pitt team, who are you? Are you good? Are you bad? Or you're just I've given up trying to figure you out. You're the crazy ex-girlfriend. That's all I got to say. I don't know when you're going to show up on the doorstep and when you're not. Duke, unfortunately, couldn't handle it defensively, and Pitt came out and gave him a tough game. So there you have that.
Well, what is Pitt's record right now in conference? Because I think they could be. Hold on, I've got Pitt right here in front of me. Give me 2 seconds. They're 3-2 overall, right?
Yep.
So they've lost to Virginia,
and they've lost to Penn State.
In conference, though, only to Virginia.
Correct.
And so they're
playing for the Coastal.
Yeah, they're right in it. Because they lose the heads up to Virginia, Virginia probably still is the front runner. But if Virginia takes another conference loss, then they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Pitt could slide right in there. Virginia, let's look. Do they have any conference? No, they don't have any conference losses. So they'll have to take 2 in order for Pitt to slide in there. But that's totally in the realm of possibilities for the ACC Coastal.
Absolutely. And with another game that paired a couple of teams that have fallen from grace, that being Virginia Tech and Miami. And the score would indicate this was a pretty tough battle. It was an offensive battle, 42-35. But if you watch the game, it was absolutely awful start to the game for the Hurricanes. You had Jaron Williams come in. He was 4 for 7 for 47 yards and 3 picks. He almost threw as many balls to Virginia Tech as he threw to his own team.
So what happened?
So I believe the score was 35-0 at one point.
No,
35.
It was 28-0.
28-0. And then it was 28-14, and then it was a back and forth. And Miami amazingly got back in this game, and it was tied 35-35.
Yeah, they brought in N'Kosi Perry.
They brought in N'Kosi Perry, ended up finishing the game at 28-47 for 422 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. And so Miami kind of brought it back. Now, they had no answer for Hooker early on in this game. And again, he wasn't spectacular in the air. He was 10-20 for 184, but he did have 3 touchdowns, a lot of short fields because of the interceptions for Miami. Apparently the turnover chain got left on the wrong sideline early on in the game. But Hooker did run well. He had 16 for 76 and a touchdown. Just a very different dynamic than what Miami was prepared for. I give Miami credit for the comeback, though it was really it was an ugly choke job by
Vatek.
by what you would think,
yeah.
Especially with a Bud Foster defense. I think both these programs, unfortunately, you can throw in FSU are kind of lost in the woods right now. Was not pretty. These are two teams that should be competing every year in that Coastal Division, and unfortunately, they just can't. So it was really an uglier game as opposed to just a battle. Again, give N'Kosi Perry credit. It's going to be interesting to see.
So what's
what they do.
with these quarterbacks all across college football that are coming, not starting games, but they come into the game because of either the guy that's starting gets hurt or is just so god awful, and all of a sudden they're great. This has happened everywhere.
Well, I think it's, I guess the way I would see it is it's a lot of game planning, and then when you aren't able to game plan for somebody, you can't see any tendencies. I guess what I will say, too, is the art, and this is kind of in the NFL a little bit as well, but particularly in college, the art of getting in at halftime and adjusting your game plan seems to be much harder to do than it has been in the past. There were some coaches that could do it all the time. Whether it's just figuring out how to motivate your players or whether it's changing something in your scheme to take advantage of a matchup, just seems like that doesn't happen. But yet then you see these quarterbacks play the next week, and it's like, USC being the perfect example.
What happened?
And you're like, what on earth? And it's almost like, okay, we got a chance to take a breath, look at the game plan. Somebody got a chance to look at some tape, and here we are. Miami did not have a strong quarterback situation coming into this year. They wanted to sit there and preach that this was a great battle and this top-tier quarterback won. Like many schools, particularly in the ACC, it really wasn't the case. I give N'Kosi Perry credit for coming in there. He's got history. He has played and started before. So it'll be interesting to see what Miami does. I really think they need to, for their future start, Jaron Williams, as ugly as that may be. But, you're going to mess with a kid's head for a player that you've already really passed on. I mean, N'Kosi Perry had his moment. So what does that say to him if you don't put him in? But, but they got to win games. Like Diaz got to win games.
Yep.
So again, that was a poor showing, really, I would say, for both teams. There was more, oh, my God, moments than I can't believe that's incredible moments. Moving on down, we had North Carolina take on Georgia Tech. What we expected was North Carolina to take out Tech. They won 38-22. I believe it was a record-setting day in the North Carolina area for their quarterback. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sam Howell had a great day, and good for him coming off the game with Clemson, which he was very solid in, and not having a letdown off coming out of a big game. He threw the ball 51 times, 33 completions, put 376 on the board and 4 TDs, had 1 pick. Another thing that's kind of stood out to me. Now the running backs had split carries, both with 20 carries in the game. Michael Carter, number 8, came up with 68 yards. Javonte Williams, number 25, came up with $144 and a TD. And when we saw them play Clemson, Carter was the lead back. I mean, obviously they're splitting carries, but he was the more productive back in that game, even though Williams was productive with what he had. So, I don't know who the guy is there, but they've got a two-headed monster in the backfield, I guess. If one guy's off one day, the other guy can pick it up. But, yeah, I think the story more so is this Howell kid, coming off of a big game but a loss to Clemson and not letting it, that take the air out of his sails, so to speak, and him continuing to perform at a high level. Keep in mind this is a freshman quarterback. So, it's his poise is what I think makes him great. I mean, is he can he run the ball like a speedster? No. Is he unbelievable with his arms? No. But he's got a good head on his shoulders.
He's a gamer.
And for quarterbacks, especially in this day and age of the college game and the NFL game, that is starting to pan out to be the best asset. Is not the athleticism so much as it is, being smart. And, this could take him a long way. The Tar Heels are, they gave us a game, and I am the Clemson homer, but they give us a game because I think they're a good team and they're a well-coached team. They took a couple bad losses, but they're only going to get better in my mind.
Yeah, and something really, I think this is kind of a little bit of a crazy stat for me, given that he's a freshman. They ran 103 plays to 60 offensive plays to Georgia Tech. Now, in fairness, Georgia Tech is not the Georgia Tech of old where they grind the clock out. They're a different team now. Still have a heavy running element to them, as you can see by the fact that they had 150 rushing yards to 171 passing yards. But for a freshman kid to be able to keep tempo in an offense to go 103 plays is pretty impressive. And I got to be honest, next year, ACC quarterback of the year, we'll still, preseason will rest on Trevor Lawrence. But this is a kid that could be the next big ACC quarterback to come out. At this point, I don't see a whole lot of people challenging him. I like the way he plays.
Yeah. I don't want to spend too much more time on it because overall the ACC, quiet this weekend. But I do want to make mention number 21 on North Carolina's defense, the Chaz Surratt kid. Yep. 7 tackles, 5 assists. Like he was the leading tackler again. That guy is NFL bound. He is a really, really good player. He's everywhere around the ball. So, kudos to him for performing. Doesn't matter what level of the competition. His game is at a high level.
Absolutely. And to round out the week, we had Boston College heading down to Louisville. Is it still Papa John's Stadium? I think it is, right? Yeah. Maybe not, though. I don't know after the whole Papa John's debacle. But anyway, Boston College, again, stumbles. 39-41, loses to Louisville. Louisville, a good bounce back after having an off week from their loss to Florida State. Boston College continues to struggle. Doesn't really seem to have the MO of the defensive running with the running game that we're used to seeing out of Boston College. Again, this is a battle of probably weaker teams that we've got going right now. So that kind of wraps up the ACC. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about there. Again, it's really going to be the Clemson show from here on out, and to see how they perform. So we're going to move on to the Big 12. Had a couple of good games in here. I'm going to run through a few scores here. One, we had TCU went to Iowa State and took the loss. Iowa State put up 49 points on TCU's defense to 24 for TCU overall. This is just two teams that are kind of middle of the pack, definitely have some weaknesses that they haven't had in the past. Iowa State looking a little bit better as the year has gone on, but still a 3-2 team. Yeah. So, and then another game here is Oklahoma State, who came in ranked, coming off a really, impressive performance against Texas in a loss. Went and played Texas Tech in their air raid offense.
Oh, man, what happened?
Texas Tech looked the part in this game, and the Cowboys could not keep pace. Duffy went 26 of 44 for 424 and 4 touchdowns. They were able to run the ball pretty effectively. Oklahoma State, on the other hand, kind of had their hands full. Sanders went 22 of 37 for 290 with 2 touchdowns, but also had 3 picks. Yeah. Hubbard, though, did run the ball very well. He was a workhorse, 34 of 156 for 3 scores. But again, just in a losing effort to Texas Tech. And Texas Tech has Baylor.
They go to Waco this weekend. Baylor's undefeated. They're at 22, which I think is underrated. I've talked about Baylor a lot from the beginning of the season. Not a lot, but from the beginning of the season, I looked at them as a contender in the Big 12. I think a lot of people were overlooking them. Baylor this weekend went to Manhattan, Kansas to take on K-State. Did their thing, bro. 31-12 was the final. Kansas State, not a great team, but a 3-2 record. So on the winning side, or they were 3-1 going into the game. So definitely on the winning side. Charlie Brewer, pretty good for Baylor at quarterback. 14-23, 230 yards, 1 TD, no picks. They ran the ball very well. They had 2 backs pretty much average between the 2 of them had 15 carries, but averaged over 10 yards a carry. And, I think that Matt Rule's team is one that an Oklahoma or Texas better be aware of.
Absolutely.
Now they'll be tested this weekend against Texas Tech because, what Kansas State isn't on the offense is explosive, and Texas Tech is an air raid team, so they come at you to run a lot of plays, put a lot of points on the board, and Baylor I think can hang. And it's not, we've seen Baylor before the whole issue that took place there be very explosive offensively and put a lot of points on the board, but I think it's the Baylor defense that really, impresses me right now. I think the offense is fine, but it's their defense that's pretty good. And, notoriously, it's the Big 12 doesn't have teams with defense. We're going to get to find out starting this weekend when they get Texas Tech if they can slow them down. If they can do that and continue to do what they do on offense, then my thought process about Baylor will be solidified even more, and it's something that an Oklahoma better be aware of because they're not going away, and I think they're well coached. It's really tip the cap to Rule coming in, taking over that program when it was a mess, and stuck with it, was able to keep some guys there even with bans thrown on the program, keep guys in the program, and has built it to a great spot. And they are, I think that Charlie Brewer kid's really not a bad quarterback. And, you got lots of quarterbacks in the Big 12 that are talked about all the time. This guy's not one of them.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, I think they like it that way.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's hard right now. It's kind of the way this is shaped out, and as we said, the top tier of football, usually you're going to see a little bit of chaos, more so on the top end. This year, it's really been 15 through 25. It's been tough to stay in there.
Tough to hang in.
So remaining quiet has been hard because there haven't been these teams that have stayed in that 17, 18 range for a little while and then popped up. I think you're right. I think this is a team that could do it. They entered the rankings this week at 22.
And they're undefeated at 5-0.
Yep.
I mean, like that for them to be 22, that's why I say I think they're a little underrated. But again, I just said it as well. I think they like it that way.
Yeah.
They want to stay under the radar.
You want to sneak up on an Oklahoma and a Texas or whoever. You don't want all the pomp and circumstance right now, and I think that's playing into their favor. And like you said, they're playing a brand of ball that is not the Bryles brand of ball, but it's working for them, and that's you can't deny that.
Yep.
So why don't we move on to the next Big 12 matchup we had with Texas and West Virginia? What say you, my friend?
There was, and again, it's like we said, the teams at the top there were a lot of teams at the top this week that struggled against inferior opponents in my mind, unranked opponents maybe, but they only struggled early. And then, you might have thought this is going to be the week that, they're going to get. There's an upset here in the works with one of these top teams, and then everything played itself out. But West Virginia, they gave them it was 7-7 after the first quarter. Texas throws 2 touchdowns on in the second, and West Virginia matches it with 1 touchdown, not matches it, but answers with 1 touchdown. So you go into half 21-14 down. Only 3 points scored in the third, and that was by West Virginia. So it's 21-17 going into the fourth quarter. Yep. With Texas that has been looking pretty damn good, even with a loss to LSU.
Yep.
Ellinger was, had a modest day. Not super efficient, about 50%, 18-33, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air to 1 pick, but he also was 9 for 45 on the ground and 2 TDs on the ground. So I did see, and they actually talked about it, during the game or maybe post game. There was one of the touchdowns he scrambled for from about the 10 that he dropped back to pass, and he really did a great job of hanging in the pocket and looking off all of his, receivers, all of his options. And it didn't take a lot of time, but I guess I say that. And then he scrambled and took it in to be unstopped because really he can become like Hurts, like a running back when he tucks that thing and goes. But it just to his progression in the game, some people may still not be a complete believer or buying into Ellinger as a college quarterback that may have NFL potential. But what I saw specifically on that play tells me he is definitely maturing and he'll have his shot. he'll have his shot. He's doing things that, you need to do to take your game to the next level. And I'm not just saying in college, but to put yourself in a position to get drafted in the NFL.
Yeah, and he's going to have the Red River shootout next week. I'm not allowed to say that anymore. The rivalry.
You say what we
the
want.
Sooners.
This is a podcast.
I kid. This is not a PC program. But he'll have the Sooners next week, so it'll be interesting. He'll get his shot. And speaking of the Sooners, Oklahoma went to Kansas. And what did you see there?
Again, it was, like I said, this week was, you thought maybe it was going to happen. The game starts out, first quarter ends, and it's tied 7-7. The game ended up with Oklahoma blowing them out 45-20. But this is a Kansas team that, not been good last few years. Great that they got old Les in there. I think he'll bring that program up from the depths. It may not be, winning, but at least to the point where they could get to a 500 season. I do see that happening in the future and hopefully beyond that. But, the way Oklahoma's been playing, you'd expect that they've come out the gates and just rolled people, and it wasn't so much out the gate. Scored a couple of touchdowns in the second quarter to go in at half, 21-7. But still, it's like, man, that just seems a little, even a couple scores behind. That seems a little closer than need be. Jalen Hurts had an okay day through the air, 16-24, 228 yards, 2 TDs, 1 pick. Ran the ball, though, just like Ellinger, 10 for 56 and a couple of touchdowns. And that's it. I mean, we've said it since the beginning of the season. This isn't Baker Mayfield. This isn't Kyler Murray. Even though those guys could scramble and run, they are still passing quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts is a dual threat quarterback, and Lincoln Riley has developed an offense to suit his quarterback like he has the past 2 years. That's why these guys won the Heisman and been so prolific and productive, because their coach has done a great job of putting them in the right position to not just help their team win, but for them to just go ape shit. Put it out there. And so they ran the ball well, Oklahoma, with this Stevenson kid. And what did he went? He wasn't even a lead carrier. I mean, the Sermon's their top back. He had a good day too, 11 for 71 with the TD. But this Stevenson kid, number 29, touches the ball 5 times, 109 yards in the TD. That's like, it's crazy. So what I will say is, I mean, like, obviously when you look at that, I give a little bit of credit to Kansas for they took away the passing offense for the most part. I mean, they had to decide to do something. I mean, it's not like they completely took it away, but they held it to 228 yards. For any other team, you might say, hey, that's a lot of yards to the air. But what we've seen out of Oklahoma, that's on the low end. But they turned to their ground game and they got it done, because I'm looking at this. They have, Stevenson had 109 yards. Sermon had 71. Jalen Hurts had 56. This Pledger kid had 30. The Asamoah kid had, they turned to the ground game and got 4 touchdowns out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, Jalen Hurts did not have a record-setting day, but certainly maintains his pace in the Heisman race with 4 touchdowns, and he's doing what it takes to win. Kansas was upstart in this game, and I think gave them all they had, and he can't knock their quarterback. A little bit of garbage time scores here, but he still had a good game, 3 touchdowns and no picks. So it's an up and coming team, at least from where they've been, and that's a good sign. Like you said, Les Miles, I think, is doing what he can to make that team more competitive.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move on from the Big 12 and move on to the Big 10. Some games in note. 2 teams that just really have not looked good. Nebraska and Northwestern this year had Northwestern went to Nebraska. It was a 13-10 game. Set your alarm to wake you back up after that game, because it wasn't really that exciting. Another team maybe worth talking about as we move forward to keep an eye on is Minnesota. Minnesota beat Illinois 40-17. I believe Minnesota is still undefeated.
They are.
So that's an interesting one.
Who do they get next week? Do you have that there?
Minnesota gets Nebraska at
Yeah.
home. So that's one they should be able to, if they continue their pace, win again. Also got Maryland heading to the doormats of the Big Ten in Rutgers, 48-7. Rutgers is just, dear God. There's not much to say there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess good for Maryland to kind of get back on track, especially offensively. It's, their defense isn't there yet because, when they went up against tougher teams, they weren't able to hold them down, and that affected their offense, I think. But they've gone up against opponents that aren't as good, and they've been able to do their thing. So, I think that the work needs, Loxley's great, but he's the offensive-minded guy. What they need to start to look at for the future is making sure they shore up that defensive side of the ball with, the right coaching staff and the right players.
Yep, absolutely.
And then they could really cause trouble.
And then, we'll move on. And one of the teams there's some playoff teams, obviously, or playoff caliber teams going right now in the Big Ten. We'll start with Kent State heading to Wisconsin. Tell me what you saw.
I saw Jonathan Taylor is what I saw.
And I believe that Kent State saw the back of his jersey all game.
I mean, they saw whether it's a mirror and they saw 3-2 or they saw it directly 2-3. Number 23, 19 carries for 168 yards.
186 yards.
186 yards and 4 TDs. I mean, God, every week this guy, he's there with the Heisman conversation. There's no way getting him out, and I take it a little bit to my homer side because I know, our running back at Clemson, Travis Etienne, is a boss, and going into the end, not necessarily from a Heisman perspective, but going into the NFL next year, draft stock. Taylor, a lot of outlets has Taylor as the number one back to go in the first round, and a lot of people have Etienne as the second back, also to make it in the first round, maybe late, but. You see Taylor, you see what Chuba Hubbard's doing, you see what J.K. Dobbins is doing for Ohio State, and Etienne has had a good year, but not the year I think everybody had hoped because the offense is still working out some kicks, I guess, outside of the first game where he blew up when we needed him to. But I'm hoping with this bye week, again, this is a selfish statement because I'm a homer for Clemson. I'm hoping with this bye week, those guys watched a couple of these games, not just college, but NFL, and see how people are taking their game to the next level, knowing there's more beyond this, that if they are elite, they need to play like that. And because Jonathan Taylor he's running himself into college record books, man. The guy's incredible.
Yeah, he is. I mean, and they've got a lineage there at Wisconsin, but we might be seeing the best. This kid is, and I will tell you, if you give the kid the Heisman, you bring 5 guys up there with him, and that's those 5 boys up front because they are road graders. Unlike anybody in college football that I've seen. I watched all the
there are holes that I could run through and pick up 10 yards easily. Yeah, it's just crazy, man. Yeah. The one thing, and I think a lot of people have talked about it, is their quarterback. They're a one-dimensional team. They are. Cohn was 12 for 15. They only threw the ball 15 times, 134, 2 TDs through the air, no picks. That's fine, but if they get in a game, and we've said it before, where the focus is to shut that run game down, and they get a team like an Ohio State that might be able to do it, or even this weekend. Doesn't Wisconsin and Iowa play this weekend?
No, Wisconsin plays Michigan State.
Oh, Wisconsin. Well, even there, man, if Michigan State, if they buck up and are able to give them something on the run, which they can, then. Is this Cone kid going to be able to take them where they need to go? We don't know yet. They haven't really had to do that, obviously, because Taylor's running for, everything under the sun. So,
Michigan State, we'll talk about it in a minute, but was seeing a running game nightmare last week. They may see something even worse this week. It's possible. So, another game to move on to is what I think is probably – if there's a quiet team in the top 15, it's this team, and that's Purdue going to play Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State won 35-7 in this game. Now, granted, Purdue is without its quarterback and I believe its top receiver.
Yep, Rondell Moore was out as well.
Yeah, so
They actually had multiple injuries. They're limping into this game.
Yeah, but Penn State
Right out the gate.
took
First
care
quarter,
of business.
dude. First quarter, 21-0. They're a good team. I think again they've been able to put some points on people, but it's just like I said about Baylor. What I think you better be careful of is their defense. Pretty good, man. Pretty good defense, and that's what you're going to need at this point in that conference because there's players in the Big Ten, and sooner or later they're going to face each other and it'll shake out. So they keep rolling the way they have on that side of the ball, and they're. I don't know. We'll get into Ohio State, but I don't know. I mean, Ohio State is just, the identity is now really rearing its head for them, and I can't. Again, not a big Ohio State guy. I do like the fact. I guess I like him more that Urban Meyer's not there because Ryan Day seems to be a good coach. What I heard about him. In terms of the way he holds practice, it's like these guys fall in line when the whistle blows. They're falling in line, and even the players say it wasn't like that with Meyer. So I like to hear that, dude, because again, coaching is so important. I feel like where Ohio State has been, lost in the past, where they stumble. Before getting themselves seemingly into the championship and aren't able to get there has been, a little bit of unruliness in the locker, not just a lot of discipline. And it seems like they have that now. And how I felt about Fields on, not on the positive side from the beginning, but the kid is rocking and rolling, man. Yep. He looks awesome. Yeah. He looks awesome.
So what we'll do is there's a couple other big games here, and you're touching on one of them right now with Ohio State.
We're going to
dive into those as the big games of the week. And so from here, we're going to move on to the Pac-12. A couple of interesting games here, but we'll run down some scores. Oregon State, UCLA. Oregon State goes to LA and wins 48-31. Not horribly exciting on any aspect. Neither one of those teams have been particularly strong. They do score some points at times.
Oregon State is actually, in terms of that conference, I actually look at them below UCLA. And then after UCLA pulled off that win against Washington State, I was like, oh, okay, maybe they're starting. And then this again. It's like, they can't. There's no consistency there.
Yeah, and another game to talk about too is Arizona heads to Colorado and takes on the Buffaloes, and Arizona went in and won 35-30. And we heard a stat on the radio as we were coming in here, which is kind of crazy. After that first loss that Arizona had against Hawaii, right? Yeah, it was like, what's going on with Arizona? But they've rebounded nicely. And interesting, Khalil Tate in his first game in Colorado, what did they say? He ran for 300 yards. And then in this game, he throws for 400 yards. Yeah. So there's something about Colorado that they really like.
And maybe he should have went to school there.
Yeah, and Arizona's quietly 4-1. And they take on Washington next week. So that's a team that you may want to keep an eye to. I'm certainly a lot of air came out of the.
They're not even ranked, are they?
No,
they're not ranked at 4-1. No. I mean, I don't think necessarily they should be, but I mean they are 4-1.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll touch on a couple of other games here that we had, and I'll let you go to it. Number 13, Oregon is at home against Cal. Cal, again, was an undefeated team until last week and lost, and now they are a two-loss team because Oregon takes care of business 17-7.
Yep. My man Justin Herbert, efficiency was okay, 20 for 33, only 214 yards through the air, 1 TD, 1 pick. But there weren't a lot of points put on the board, and apparently they just turned to the run game. One of the things that I had said about Cal was the defense was really probably, though they flew under the radar, it's because they're not like throwing up a bunch of points offensively, but it was their defense kind of helping them win games. And, Oregon's a high-powered offense. I don't care what you say, even still to this point. And, to hold them to 17 is not too bad. This is a Cal team that last year was, nobody they even thought of. So, turning some things around fairly quickly in the right direction for that program. But Oregon, they got to just keep rolling right now because, they're if the Pac-12 has a shot, I know a lot of people are still talking about Washington and so forth, but if the Pac-12 has a shot, I still think it's Oregon because they sit at 13. They're 4-1. That one loss was to Auburn at the beginning of the season. Obviously, we'll talk about that Auburn-Florida game, what happened there, but Auburn's still a good school in the best division of the best conference in college football, and they barely lost. So, that's if the Pac-12 is going to have a representative, I still think it's Oregon's to lose. So they took care of business. I mean, this is a Cal team that they were both 4-1 going in, or they were both. What Cal was 4-1,
3-1. No,
4-1, and Oregon was 3-1. So, you just got to take care of business every week. Every week matters in college football, and anything can happen. This wasn't a slouch of a team in Cal, and Oregon took care of business. It was at home. You might think, they have, more of an advantage there. Might have thrown up more points on their own turf, but for the most part, I think they did all right. I don't want to not mention Oregon's defense. I mean, they held them to one touchdown. Their quarterback, 190 yards through the air, 1 TD and 2 picks. On the ground, they held Cal to, let's see, what is that, 80 yards total amongst 3 backs. So Oregon's defense stepped up, and again, that's what you need. You're gonna compete in the playoffs. You got to have a complete team on both sides of the ball. 3 phases of the game: offense, defense, and special teams.
Yeah, and maybe even a little bit of a coming out party for those that know one of the top recruits in the nation, Kayvon Thibodeau. Sorry, I always want to go back to the Bulls coach. Had 2 tackles for losses and 2 sacks in this game, so kind of hit a little bit of a level. We'll see if he can sustain, but if you've ever seen this kid, he is a freak of a person. He looks like he was a redshirt senior coming in his freshman year, and so he had a big game too as well. So that was kind of an interesting matchup. Certainly Oregon continues to put itself in the forefront of the Pac-12, as far as this game is concerned. And then another game, which really probably was more of an elimination game, is number 15 Washington playing Stanford, who is, as we've mentioned in several of these podcasts, has been limping around this year. They're at home, and they take care of business against the Huskies and win 23-13. So that was that's kind of an interesting one. You thought Washington maybe would start to get on a roll. Saw Eason kind of regress again in this game. 16-36 for 206 with 1 score and 1 pick. Yeah. So kind of an interesting little play here.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's inconsistencies again. If you're going to win the big ones and make it to the end of this thing and have a shot, you got to get more consistent. And, look, it's still, though we are about the halfway point, now's the time moving forward that you better get yourself more consistent. You can't have Jacob Eason go out one game and throw for 400 yards and 4 TDs and maybe 0 to 1 pick, and then the next game he's throwing like 200 yards and 1 TD. You gotta be a little more consistent than that. And look, he's not a freshman, but he's not been able to lead a team yet, and this is his first chance getting it, and that could cause problems later on.
Yeah, and that's against a backup quarterback in Davis Mills, who had a really nice game at 21-30 for 293 and a score. Washington, this is tough. It looks like it's Oregon and Arizona's to play in the title game.
And you got Arizona State still kind of creeping around there too. Yep. So I mean, those things will shake out. And I don't want to put it past the Arizonas or the Arizona States, but. In my mind, it's Oregon's shot, just because of the level of competition that, they've played, win or lose, just the way they've played. They've been fairly consistent with their game thus far this year. So, you don't, there's nothing to kind of raise red flags. I'm not going to fault them for a tough loss to Auburn at the beginning of the year. So,
yep, absolutely. So we We have wrapped up, I believe. Did I miss any games here in the Pac-12? I think we got them all.
Yeah, as far as I can tell.
so-
Utah, was that this weekend?
Now
They were off this week, I
Yep.
think. Yeah.
Yep. So we'll move on to the SEC and talk about some of the games there. A couple of just mentionables here. Ole Miss was at home against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt really struggling this season. Ole Miss took them out 31-6. Again, it's a shame because they do have a really talented running back. The Commodores do, and just he's really struggled to get going. On the other end, the Rebels were without Matt Corral in this game. So Plumlee played nothing spectacular through the air, but was a monster on the ground at 22 carries for 165 yards and a touchdown.
I don't know that Corral will get his job back.
He may not.
Because they've looked much better offensively, especially under Plumlee. Is this kid related to the Plumlee boys from, what was it, North Carolina? Spelled the same way.
Related to the basketball boys. I
Yeah,
don't
the
know.
basketball
That's-
guys.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. Maybe we'll turn it over to Google, folks.
All right, well, but nah,
And another game, this really should have been very little to mention, but there is something that unfortunately I have to mention is Troy taking on Missouri. In this game, Missouri takes care of business 42-10. But unfortunately in this game, Kelly Bryant takes a really cheap hit. It's kind of the definition of dirty. He was having a good game. He was 12-19, 221 and 3 scores at that point. And it looks like last I heard season done. It was
No.
It's not.
No, I think he'll be okay.
Really? Oh,
it looked like it was.
nasty.
It was nasty. But I actually talked to a friend of mine this morning who works for SEC media outlet Saturdays down south about it, and from what the intel he gave me is that Kelly will be okay. Now, does that mean he'll play this week? I don't know, but that's what I heard. Now, that may change. Again, I like Kelly B, former Clemson quarterback, so I hate to see that, but. He's doing a good job. I think he's doing everything that, he wanted to do and that people expected him at Missouri. So, hats off to him. I hope he can get back and continue his season because, they could be a thorn in a few of those SEC East teams' side, if they don't watch it. So, that was something else. Who else we got? We got Utah State, LSU. We've talked a lot about the Utah State quarterback, Jordan Love, throughout the year, but that is all they have because their team is just not getting it done. 42-6 LSU. Again, my man Joe Burrow has just in a Heisman consideration day. 27-38, 344 yards, 5 TDs, 1 pick. They ran the ball well, and at no point in this game, not that you would expect it, did Utah State pose it? Well, I guess I take that back. This kind of plays into the whole starting game, the big-time teams this week going up against teams and starting a little slow. It was 7-6 at the end of the first quarter, so you're like, what's going on? Yeah, Utah State didn't score the rest of the way. So, but, it was kind of funny like that. That's what I started the cast of saying, is this going to be the week we're going to have, a top upset? But, no.
Yeah, it became apparent in the last 75% of the game that LSU was a top 5 team. Love did absolutely nothing. In fact, did less than nothing because he threw 3 balls to the other team. Just wasn't a good day. LSU, we're getting primed and ready for some of these matchups against these heavyweights to start to take place as they get it done. And then moving on, this one had some interest for a little while longer certainly than this.
Yeah, and by the way, LSU this weekend, Florida comes to town.
Yep.
Night game in Death Valley. You know how that is. I think game days there.
Yep. Yeah. That
number 7 versus number 5.
We'll touch on that Florida-Auburn matchup and talk a little bit about Florida. Before then, we had Georgia going to Tennessee, take on good old Rocky Top. Flipped on the game a little later into I think it was the first quarter, and it was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, 14-10 Tennessee.
Yeah.
It was, man. I tell you something. It was I was with the kids at the Dave and Buster's, and I was watching the game while they were playing some vids. And, there's plenty of Georgia people there. We are in Atlanta, and you could see people getting a little uncomfortable in their seat, like, what's going on? But, look, the Georgia offensive line, they'll pound on you, and they'll pound on you. You better have some depth, or you better be ready to take it all game. Otherwise, it's just going to wear you down. But the real story, I think, is Fromm. I mean, the guy was 24 of 29 for 288 yards, 2 TDs, no picks. He hasn't thrown a pick this year. He hasn't taken a sack this year. The guy, he's more than a game manager. We were listening to it on the radio. He's a good player. It's the head on these quarterbacks' shoulders that has become a very, very strong asset, because he's not athletically gifted, to the point of a Trevor Lawrence or of a Justin Fields or of a Justin Herbert, but that guy gets it done. And
he's a winner.
I like Fromm. He's a gamer. I love him. If they still have everything in front of them, and if Georgia not just gets to the playoffs or the championships or wins it, just any one of those things, getting them in the playoffs, getting to the championship game, winning the championship game, it's going to be Jake Fromm that does it, not the running game, okay? And I'm not saying the running game won't have an impact. It will. It will absolutely. But it's that kid. He is a great leader. He's a great leader. And that's, that I think that's their key to getting it there. Is they run it, they're good, and they need to have. I feel like even the fans don't have enough faith in him sometimes when it's on his shoulders. He's not a world beater from the stats perspective throwing the ball, but he is very efficient. He knows how to read the D. He knows how to change the play call to put himself in the best possible position to win.
And this is a Jake Fromm's, stat line that you will see over and over again, regardless of the competition. 24, 29, 288, and 2 touchdowns. The guy is consistent in this. I agree. Interesting thing we heard about today, or looked at, was Georgia has not given up a rushing touchdown yet this year. If you can't run the ball, you are going to struggle to beat a team like this. And so, again, they're somewhat quiet, too. With all the hoopla around the SEC West, they just keep plugging along. Obviously they're going to have a big game here at the end of this month with Florida. And I believe someone's coming to town. They got to play Bama, right? Is that?
I don't think they have Bama this year.
They don't have Bama?
They have Auburn. They always have Auburn because that's their cross-conference rival.
Maybe that's what I was thinking of. So, there's some games upcoming, but this Georgia team just kind of keeps plugging. And I give credit. Like Maurer looked good in that game for Tennessee early on, was playing well, was getting them on their heels. Tennessee came out with an energy I haven't really seen from them in not just this year, but a few years. So, but again, in the end, it was Georgia's strength and depth that they just took them apart, and Fromm did his thing.
Yeah, they ran them over.
Yep. So that ended up being a big win. All right, so I will mention one other game here, and only just because it's time to put this to bed. UCF was taking on Cincinnati, and I'm going to leave it at this. They lost. The glass slipper is broken. No more talk about non-power fives right now.
I know SMU.
With the exception of maybe Notre Dame. Yeah, SMU
I know
maybe.
SMU is undefeated, but no, it's not going to get them in. Now, what I will say is they took the loss to Cincinnati, right?
Yep.
And, look, Cincinnati has done well thus far this year. They may be better than people think. Now, I don't think they're going to get in because they still have the loss at the beginning of the year at Ohio State, but that's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yep.
You talk about level of competition. Maybe that Cincinnati team at the beginning of the year was playing Ohio State, who Ohio State demolished. Maybe Cincinnati is a good team. So what does that say about Ohio State? They're good, man.
Yep.
They are good, and they're everywhere. Everywhere. We'll dive more into them, but they're good. They're good. They're for real. So I said that to say is Cincinnati takes part UCF. Enough of that, but they might be a good team, and look what Ohio State did to them early in the year. So.
Yep, we're going to touch on the last 3 games. Which
And by the way, the Tide was off this week. We didn't mention that.
Yep,
the Tide, as well as Clemson, who both teams having a bye, and some great production out of these other top teams, didn't move in the AP rankings. It's still them 1, us 2.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll let you. It's dealer's choice here. Which one of these 3 you want to take on first?
Let's go to the first one up there. Let's go Auburn, Florida, bro. Let's go Auburn, Florida, broski. So this was one of the big games of the day.
The only top 10 matchup.
Yep. It wasn't the game day game. That was actually at the Ohio State Michigan State game. But look, I went into this game again. I was talking to my guy from Saturdays Down South, Mr. Chris Marler. If you don't know Chris Marler, Marler, Saturdays Down South, and you're a football, especially college football, especially an SEC homer, you need to be checking him out on your socials. It's great stuff. But I was talking to him last week, just by the eye test and the level of competition, all things past history being aside, I was looking at Auburn as the best team in the country. Why? Because they had the tools, especially defensively. Now, the first game of the year against Oregon, that first half, we talked about that being the offensive line of Oregon versus the defensive line of Auburn. And that first half, it's like, well, there is no defensive line at Auburn. Maybe a little, but, it's obvious they're not what we thought they were. Yeah, they came out of the locker room at half in that first game and haven't let up since. Even in this 24-13 loss, their defense, in particular their defensive line in front, did everything they could to even win the game for them. I mean, you are talking Derek Brown, with tackles for loss, sacks, picks. I mean, these guys were everywhere. Javaris Davis was everywhere. Marlon Davidson all over the place. I mean, these guys they have the tools to slow down teams like Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Auburn on that defensive side of the ball. What ended up rearing its ugly head for them was the true freshman quarterback had a true freshman game. Bo Nix didn't look great. You can't fault him for it, man. Tough environment. He's played well in some of these big games already, like that first one of the year. And, he had not so great of a day. 11 of 27, 145, 1 TD, 3 picks. Ran the ball 10 times for only 18 yards, no TDs. They really didn't get the running game going. Whitlow touched it 18 times for 81 yards, no TDs. Their top receiver, Seth Williams, he's great. He was 4 for 79 for 1 TD, but, he was four receptions, was the leading receiver on the team. So that speaks more to Nick's having trouble, man. And I tip my hat to Mullen and the Florida defense because, like I said, Auburn's D looks like they have the tools to stop some of these big teams. But on this day, it was the Florida defense that was what was shining. They really, and I've said the whole time, I think Florida is completely overrated. I do think they're a little better under, Trask than they were Franks, but, and he took a beating in the game. Went out of the game. The hit he took, it's just like Kelly. I was like, oh, he ends up coming back out of the locker room with the brace on and getting on the field. Like, I thought his knee was shredded. And he gets back out there to play, leads him to a win. Look, Dan Mullen is a very good coach, man. He is. They may be overrated, but the only reason, and I may continue to say, the only reason they're not is because Dan Mullen's our head coach.
And this is like, it's not even kissing your sister. It's like making out with her for an hour for me talking about Florida. But
I know Florida State fan.
I'm gonna step back and say that I've been wrong about Florida being overrated. Think about this. They lost the turnover battle 5-3.
Yeah.
They overcame that against a defense like that. And while nothing was spectacular offensively, it was good. Their running game, they had the big run from Pirine, which was awesome, an 88-yard run. This is a team that just gets it done, and their defense is awesome. I hate to say it, but they've gotten nothing but better every week that I've seen them. And they're legit. And like you said, Dan Mullen is he's got that quarterback whisperer mentality about him. He's getting the most out of this kid. Like, you can't overlook Florida anymore. Like I did. I thought they were overrated coming into this game.
Yeah.
What I saw them do, they had the home field advantage, but to overcome 5 turnovers against a top 10 team, you got to take something from that. Their defense bowed up when they needed to. They confused a young quarterback, but let's not kid ourselves. I mean, Trask has started, 1 or 2 games since his freshman year in high school, and that's including college, and yet
he's
he
not
performed.
a freshman, dude. He's like, what, a junior, senior?
Right.
I mean, the guy's been there riding pine.
Right, and he performed. I mean, 1931 for 234 and 2 scores, but more importantly, no picks.
I'm telling you, he took a hit. And again, I don't know if it was dirty. Mullen was going crazy because he thought it was dirty. They did show the replay. It did look like the Auburn defensive lineman was pushed a little bit into him, so you couldn't completely say it was like filthy dirty. I've seen much worse, but I thought the kid was done for the year. And even the way they pulled him off the field, and he put a little knee brace out, comes back out and gets it in there and toughs it out and leads his team. And not that, they have the Emory Jones kid who's a freshman and a big recruit, but, he did his thing, man. And, it's the cocktail party on the 2nd of November between Georgia and Florida. As long as, as what I'm seeing in terms of Florida's schedule, they've got to take on LSU this weekend. But regardless of if they win or lose that, I mean, if they do lose, they can go to the cocktail party, beat Georgia, and get themselves in the SEC championship game. So it's starting to shape up as, Georgia's owned the SEC the past several years, and it's like, is Florida really going to contend? Well, they may be able to contend now.
Look, they can win any game with that defense playing like it's playing right now, and they can beat it. They can go to LSU and beat LSU. Do I think that's going to happen? Not so much, but they can. I saw enough to know that if this gets in the fourth quarter, Florida can win this game.
I honestly didn't think they had much of a shot against Auburn. I didn't know if it was going to be a blowout, but I thought Auburn could at least win that game by a score or so.
And defensively, I mean, they won the sack battle too. I mean, it was 4-2. Auburn had 4 sacks to 2 on. So I mean, they just did all the right things at the right time. It was a good game, and Florida was just the better team that day.
Yep. It was a good game. It was back and forth most of the game, so I liked it. So we'll move on to the next big matchup, or as far as it was for the day, and that was It was the Hawkeye. The Iowa. Sorry, we're both a little still recovering from cold. So the Hawkeyes traveling over to the Big House to take on the Michigan Wolverines, and a lot of ho-hum with Michigan, feeling like we really saw what we thought out of them, getting stomped by Wisconsin, a week or 2 ago.
Yep.
And an Iowa team that is, that could be stingy. That is definitely a team in that conference that could take out one of the big boys, and just didn't happen. I don't necessarily want to say that offensively, like Michigan found itself and they dominated them. I mean, the final score was 10-3, right? But there was, one of the problems Michigan has had, especially with Shea Patterson, is turn the ball over and fumble rooskies. Didn't see a whole lot of that. So they were able to fix at least a little part of it, and maybe just fixing that little part of it led them to the win. Again, it was 10-3, so it wasn't like they beat the crap out of them. But if you watch the game, it didn't seem like Iowa was able to do anything, really. And so, though it was low scoring and maybe a score would have put them right back in it, Michigan's D wasn't really allowing for that, and they kind of, as a result, controlled the game.
Well, I mean, you figure you go into this game and there was 8 sacks against Stanley, 4 turnovers for Michigan to only, I think it was 2 sacks for Iowa and 1 turnover. Stanley was awful in this game, and I didn't really break down the tape, but I watched it. There was way too many times where, one, he's responsible. Quarterback they always tell you the quarterback's responsible for blitzes coming from the secondary. He couldn't pick them up. He was holding on to the ball way too long, and Michigan was just pinning its ears back and coming after him. This was Michigan's defense versus Iowa's defense. Patterson played a little bit more under control, but, I mean, again, not a spectacular day. He was 14 of 26 for 147 and a pick, so it's not like he lit up the stat sheet. No. Michigan did not run the ball phenomenally in this game. It was just that neither offense could really get going, and once Michigan got that lead, I mean, Iowa had probably their last 4 drives, there was opportunities for them to do it. I think at one point I was telling you they had a 2nd and 35 after bad penalties and a sack, and it was awful. It was just a poorly played offensive game on both sides. Michigan came out on top with less mistakes.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of game that 2 ranked teams in the Big Ten with aspirations of going to the title game, neither one of them can afford to play like this against the heavyweights in this conference.
Oh, no.
They will get crushed
by
teams like Ohio State, Penn State, and then also Wisconsin. So,
and look,
wasn't pretty.
I've said it before. Iowa is a team. It's very hard to beat them, whether they're good or bad, at home at Kinnick.
Yep.
This was on the road. They lose 10-3. That's just the way it shakes out. But it could quite veritably could have been, if they were playing in Iowa, it could have been 10-3 Iowa.
Yep.
At home. So it wasn't like anything stood out. But unfortunately for Iowa, they took a little bit of a loss, and that's it's going to be tough. Who do they have this week? We said Wisconsin and Michigan State. I can't remember
who does Iowa have?
Yeah,
they have Penn State.
Penn State
at home. Home. That's a game. Penn State, in all honesty, like you said, they're tough in that stadium. Penn State better look out, but
Penn State should win that game. But and now here you go, Iowa going home, coming off a loss. They've been good. Penn State's got to play their game, and we'll see, man. That's actually a great game. There's a couple of them, and we'll dive into Ohio State. But we said Michigan State, Wisconsin, definitely something to look at. Wisconsin's rolling people, so I guess it's something to look at to see who's going to slow them down before they get to Ohio State or Penn State or in the Big Ten championship game. Can Michigan State, who's kind of more of a defensive squad, do that? Saw it start out seemingly that way against Ohio State, but it didn't end up that way.
Right.
So let's dive right into it. Michigan State, Ohio State. Rightio. So we're going to wrap today with this game. Ohio State welcoming the Spartans to town. Right out the gate, 34-10, Ohio State was the final score. It was one of those games, and keep in mind, Sparty has been notoriously a thorn in the side of not just Ohio State, but a lot of these Big Ten schools year after year that may have a winning record. They can pose a problem. They have a good coach. I think you might be getting a little long in the tooth there, and they may need some fresh blood. But he is a good coach, and they're a defensive-minded team, and they're typically very solid. They're a ground and pound team that plays defense. After the first quarter, it's 3-0 Buckeyes, and it was again. Use the start again. Are we going to get the big upset to one of the top teams this week? Is Michigan State going to pull it off? The Stewart kid, the receiver for Michigan State that made an unbelievable catch in the end zone. I think it was in the second quarter. Mm-hmm. And really, they were still in it until the end of the second quarter where they just started to get annihilated. And Ohio State exploded. But he makes that catch for a touchdown. I think at that point it was like 17-10 Ohio State. And his helmet gets ripped off. He gets in the face of the Ohio State defender. He comes on the sidelines. They show him. You can read his lips. Let's go. Let's go. And, he did continue to have a good game. But, again, Ohio State is really going to be something to be reckoned with because they end up exploding in the second quarter anyways, putting 24 on the board, going into halftime, winning the game 27-10, and it seemed like it was like at the bat of an eye. Again, that dude scored. It was 17-10. They were back in it, and Ohio State just rolls. They just roll. J.K. Dobbins going crazy, 24 carries, 172 yards. One of them was a 67-yarder and a touchdown. Fields, man, the guy was 17-25, 206 yards, 2 TDs, 1 pick. He did take 3 sacks, which we haven't seen him take a lot of sacks yet this year. So that was something. But, then he gets on the ground, 11 for 61 in TD. His dual threat capabilities are for Riz. They are for Riz and faux shiz, man. And the kid is... he needs to watch what he says. There is some stuff he's said before and after games that hasn't been horrible, but that can be used by future teams as fodder. But listen, man, they're rolling. I mean, he is one of the best right now, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's definitely a Heisman candidate. They got one of the best running backs in the country, also a Heisman candidate. They've got some great receivers out there, most notably the Olave kid. On the defensive side of the ball, they get we said it before, the number 1 defensive end in the country, the number 1 cornerback in the country, and Okudah and Chase Young. I mean, and their defense is something in the past that has been, they've always kind of been solid and had players like that. Are they going to get... I don't know. They could be the best team in the country right now. They still have a lot in front of them. Mm-hmm. But, I said it. They haven't been tested. I mean, I don't think Michigan State's a slouch. I really don't. And obviously that Cincinnati game, they may, by the end of the season, turn out to be a pretty decent team from the group of 5. Maybe the team in the group of 5. Yep. And so this Ohio State team, man, the meeting between them and Penn State is going to be something. That's I think going to really, because if they do what they've been doing to a Penn State team, I don't know who's going to stop them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that is, kind of consistently, and there's a lot of talk about Fields, and to me, he's a little bit different than Jalen Hurts. In that their power defense and then more importantly their power running game really makes his life easier.
It does.
Passing the ball, there's a lot of wide open receivers, which again, I'm not going to fault him for it. He's hitting them, he's scoring the touchdowns. But their ability to run the ball and to turn it on is unbelievable. It's in a way, it's like it's kind of just like Wisconsin, but with a better passing attack, opportunity. And it's just they look the part, that is for sure. And I mean, Michigan State's gonna have nightmares watching Dobbins running on him. I mean, he was just like running. Well,
you
through
said
him.
you're making a comparison to Jalen Hurts. I said it before. Jalen Hurts is doing great, but don't get it twisted. Lincoln Riley has had to manipulate that offensive game towards Hurts. They didn't need to change, I think, the game completely, or from what they've done offensively with Urban Meyer in past years for Fields. They're doing pretty much what you're used to seeing Ohio State do, and he's just been so prolific behind there leading them.
Yep. Yeah. You talk about with Oklahoma, the reason why you had to make that change is they're so prolific passing wise the last 2 years with Heisman winners that. With Hurts, you need him to be able to use his feet to help him get rhythm in the passing game.
Yep.
Fields has just been given open looks, so again, you're right, you don't have to change it, but really what team where you just run the ball? Oklahoma just needed to be committed to running the ball and running the ball with their quarterback. Fields is up there. I want to see, I've seen Jalen Hurts tested against great teams. And he's passed some tests, and he hasn't passed some tests. But certainly, you can get a game out of him in a tough game. I want to see that out of Fields. They've yet to have that, and the way it's looking now, maybe they don't get a big game from anybody, at least not until the playoffs. So, no knock on him. Not in any way doing a knock. I do want to see it because I want to see him respond to that type of pressure. But this Ohio State team is lights out right now.
Yeah, I mean, they will welcome in Wisconsin at the end of the month to the Horseshoe. So it's that game could you never know. That could be game one of a 2-game series with these two teams because they may meet again in the Big Ten championship. But they go to Evanston this weekend to take on a 1-4 Northwestern team that is not been able to figure it out offensively, especially at quarterback. But it's a Friday night game. Sometimes you see weird things happen. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't. They're very complete right now.
Yeah.
Even if you look at all the teams, all the best teams in the country, I know Oklahoma's been rolling folks, but I still might see a little bit of a potential thorn in their side on the defensive side of the ball. Yep. They're not Ohio State. We talked about Clemson. Our run D, little bit of a question. The offense is not doing what it needs to, but we've got all the tools there, so I predict it's a matter of time before that gets going, but still not complete for Alabama. Their run game doesn't seem right, and their run D doesn't seem right. Sure, video game numbers with 2 in those receivers, it's crazy, but still not complete all the way around. Ohio State is the only team I can look at and say, man, everywhere I look on their team, they're getting it done.
I agree with you. I think they right now are the most complete team in football. A lot of games to be played.
That's the
excitement of this, but I agree.
Yep. So that'll wrap up the recap of Week 6. We thank you for listening, and we should get some more stuff out this week. Thank you, and have a great day.